So if your PTO switch is on, like this is now, or it should be. Let's see. I was just talking about bad grounds. Okay, the first part of the electrical system we're going to look at on this 1882 is going to be the engine crank circuit. So what does it take to just crank the engine and get it to turn over? Pretty simple circuit. So we'll trace it. We'll go along and look at the schematic as we're going through, but it's not too difficult to understand, especially once you start seeing all the components and where they're laid out. So we're going to start right here with the battery and the ground. So we got a ground right here, comes from the main post on the battery down to the chassis, and then from chassis goes out to everything else. So that's the common. And then you got your power wire, which if you're looking here, comes right off the battery over to the solenoid. So this would be the larger gauge wire that would come over to the solenoid to provide main battery power to the system. And then coming out of the main post on the solenoid goes out through a fuse and over to the key switch. And this is where the control side starts coming in. So all this stuff is live without even being switched until you get over here. So we come over to the solenoid. We jump off of the solenoid here into the fuse. So we got a red wire coming straight from the battery hot to a black wire that goes down into the harness here and eventually makes its way back into there where it hits the key switch. So when the key switch is off, like it is now, there's no connection between the B terminal, which is here, and the S terminal here. And that's a momentary connection that's made on the spring action of the switch. So right there. That is connecting the B terminal on the switch to the S terminal. So battery gets connected to start. So you have your main positive coming in. When you hold down the switch, you get power from the solenoid post out to the interlock switch on the red and black wire. So in here, the black wire will come in, and then coming back out will be a red wire with a black stripe. And that goes down this harness and over to here, which is where the brake interlock switch is. So this is actuated by the brake pedal, and on this tractor, that part of the circuit's actually been bypassed. So normally what would happen is that would remain an open circuit on this switch. So coming into here, the red and black wire would not be connected to the red wire, but this one's been bypassed. So you can see the red and black is coming down, and it just goes right back up. So that's been bypassed. I'm not advocating that anybody do that. I'm just showing you what this tractor looks like. So the other wires on the interlock switch are not a part of the starting circuit necessarily. So we're just focusing on how do you get power out to the starter. So there we are. There's our red and black, which actually bypasses the switch on this tractor and goes to red. And then red goes back down the harness. So we're going to follow that wire back down that way. So if you look, it comes out over here, comes back up right here, and there it is. So the red coming out of the interlock, voltage is trying to make its way out here is where it's trying to go. It's trying to get out to that post. So the next place that there's a safety interlock is on the PTO switch. So what we're looking at now is going to be the number 1 and 2. And if the switch is off, then red comes into here and comes right back out and goes down to the solenoid coil. So if that switch is off, we get a connection between this red and this red. And then if it comes down the harness this way, comes back out, and bam. That's where we end up with our 12-volt signal to turn on this coil here, like that. Pretty simple. That's the power side of the circuit. The ground is actually through the case of the solenoid. Remember, you need more than just a power source. You need a good ground. So double check your grounds, double check the connections. These are actually pretty bad on this one. It works for now, but I'm sure it would have some intermittent issues. If the PTO switch is in the run position, so if your PTO switch is on, like this is now, or it should be. Let's see. I was just talking about bad grounds. Yeah, we got bad ground again. So if the PTO switch is on, and we'll turn it on now. Go down here. Yeah, it's locked. So now that the PTO switch is on, if we try to crank, what's going to happen is we won't be able to crank because that switch is on. So if we disengage it, then we get the path restored out to here. Very simple. Not a lot to it. So we'll move on to the more complicated parts of the system, but those are the basics of the engine crank circuit. And we'll move on to the run circuit next.